Do you want to know why serial killers kill? We're going to be talking about it on today's Big Brain Relax and Learn, so stick around. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. That wasn't the wrong order. But anyways, whenever you're watching this, I am Professor Eskra, otherwise known as FB Eskra, and you are now watching the Big Brain stream. Today, we are going to be talking about the sociology of serial killers, asking what is it about society that makes people want to kill mass numbers of humans. That's basically what we're going to talk about this week, and we are continuing while hanging out with our good doctor friend. I can't even remember the main character's name because I haven't really been listening to the game while I'm talking about things. But anyways, please join us, won't you, as we talk about serial killers and play Vampyr. So, here's the good doctor, right, with his amazing... Why are you doing that to me, game? It's like you stood too long. But here's the good doctor with his amazing fucking coat that I really, really want. I can't find it. Like, look, it's got the shoulder pads and the elbow pads. Oh, and it's like a raincoat simultaneously as being like a long... Oh, so he's so stylish for being, dead. Anywho, what we're going to be talking about today is broadly 3 topics that I'll break down further as we continue to speak. First of all, we're going to be talking about social structure and its part in what drives people to criminality, but then more specifically serial killing. We will be talking about social control and how, the bonds of society so there's social structure, the setup of society, the bonds of society, social control, and then we will be talking about trauma and how that affects a person and can drive them to criminality, and again, specifically to kill large numbers of people. But again, we are experiencing this. We experienced this once before.
Oh, and the bloodlust takes hold in making feel.
But now we can ask ourselves the question, why did this man choose to kill another man and dump him into the river? That is a question that we should be able to answer tonight, as well as answer, about the good doctor and about serial killers on the whole. So I'm going to let this guy, we've discussed about this before. We're going to let him live because we're going to maybe kill him later. Maybe. All right, so we've actually heard this guy talk, so I'm going to breeze through this little thing. We've seen it before. I have to press Q to mesmerize Clay, whisper the sweet nothings, and then push him off into a corner. So that, what drives our doctor's motivations are very different from what drives most people's motivations when it comes to either criminality or serial killing, or really any sort of maladaptive behavior.
It is wise for the huntsman to sometimes let his prey go, but no famished hunter can run for long.
Like blood thing interrupts you. It's great. Anyways, sociological kind of criminological concepts, because we talked primarily about biological and psychological concepts last week. This week we're focusing on society's role. What is it about, whether it's a person's place in society or the way society is set up, that can drive a person to criminality? Well, first we're going to start with a group of theories that are under the heading social structure theories. And social structure theories primarily focus on socioeconomic class. And so even though our doctor, was almost about to eat him, he still, turns around and is like, go pick him up at the docks. He needs help. As much help as a Victorian hospital can give. That's true. And it's specifically this one, right? Pembroke is in a poor section of town. And this is kind of where we can start, right? Social structure theories talk about socioeconomic class. And I mean, it's right in the name. Social structure, the structure of society. How does that play a role in criminality? And specifically, serial killing. Well, generally speaking, when it comes to criminological concepts, social structure theory basically says that poor people commit more crime than, wealthy or affluent people because they have less options than the wealthy people, right? They need to commit crime in order to essentially get the same sort of quality or standard of life. Ooh, I just found a small bottle in a garbage can. It's this concept that the poor commit crime because they have no choice but to. Not necessarily saying that they lack self-control. There are actually classical criminologists, and we'll talk about this again in a second, that basically say that it's a rational choice to commit the crime. And when weighing the options, poor people are going to lean more likely into committing crime versus wealthy people who, have other options open to them, right? And so in a poor neighborhood like this, right, where a lot of these people who maybe say they can't get medicine when they're sick, what are they going to do? They're going to go out and steal the medicine. That's what social structure theory says. But how does that apply to serial killers? Well, serial killers specifically, it's about the geographical nature of our society, in the sense that, we kind of gather together in these larger cities and then kind of like peter out and become less dense as we go out to the rural areas. Social structure theory, and I mean statistics, back up the fact that, more murders happen in more densely populated areas. If you were to take all of the serial killers, can I go into... I can peer through your window. Hello, madam. How are you? If you were to break down kind of the list of states by frequency of serial killing, right at the top, states that have the highest frequency of serial killers would start with, let's see, I have it written here, California, followed by Florida, then New York, Texas, right, I believe, and then it's like North Carolina and Georgia, I believe, are the next two. But California, of course, the most populated state in the Union, has the highest frequency of serial killers. No shit, Sherlock, right? That shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. The more people you have in the area, the more likely you're going to see something exist. And serial killers exist, so you're going to see more of them there. Cities specifically, however, seem to attract serial killers because the more dense a population is, the easier it is for a person to blend in, become anonymous, right? To kind of like sink into the crowd. And a serial killer who maybe that is kind of his modus operandi or whatever, that may be valuable to them. It may be alluring to them. And so they are going to gravitate towards the cities, and that's where their killings are going to take place. Others, however, maybe depending upon their victim choice, may not be able to find their particular choice of victim in the cities and may go out into the rural areas. It also kind of has to do with where the serial killer lives, right? Which plays a part in place versus traveling killers. But when it comes to traveling killers, one of the reasons why killers travel, right? So you find serial killers who travel, it has to do with their occupation, like their primary day job. Really compels them to travel. And we'll talk about that in a later stream. So stick around, come on back. However, here's an interesting little tidbit. While the more populated a state, the higher frequency of serial killers you're going to find. Ooh, I'm going to steal that bone saw, if you don't mind. But at the same time, the state that has the highest rate of serial killings per capita, which means like per every 100,000 people, is Alaska. The least densely populated state in the Union. So you have the most densely populated state in the Union, California, having the highest frequency of killers, meaning number of killers, per year, essentially. But when it comes to the number of killings per capita, serial killers in Alaska just go buck wild. Just apparently, think about it. You can kill and then disappear off into the wilderness, like the wilder people.
Uncle, you're basically a criminal now. But on the bright side, you're famous.
That's kind of how social structure theory applies to serial killers, and we've just kind of been wandering around the hospital for now. But let's actually get something done. We need to analyze the blood, and because this is the blood that we collected from that zombie that attacked us earlier. It's like Dexter. Yes, I'm analyzing the blood. Oh wait, no, like Dexter sorry, I thought you meant like Dexter's Laboratory. That's a completely different show.
I have so much time now.
That's actually, so that he just mentioned something. I have so much time now. I find that an interesting concept. The most interesting thing I find about vampires is that their immortality, yeah, it grants them unlimited time. Like, what would you do with unlimited time? I'd learn every talent I fucking could, probably. We're gonna go to bed now, and I'm gonna continue talking because we are moving on to social class theory, which is still under the social structure theory, right? Remember, social structure is about the structure of a society, and it specifically focuses on socioeconomic class. Well, social class theory expands upon that a little bit. And basically, there's two things I want to talk about. And first, again, we're going to talk about it more broadly with respect to criminality, and then we're going to focus it onto serial killers. As part of social class theory, there is kind of a subsect of that theory called social strain theory. And social strain largely depends upon this sociological concept called anomie. Not anime, anomie, all right? So it's spelled A-N-O-M-I-E, not A-N-I-M-E, right? We're not talking about, Genshin Impact here, or whatever the hell the newest anime is. We're talking about a sociological concept, anomie. And it's best defined as a sense of frustration at not being able to achieve that which is expected of you through the means which are expected of you. So what does that mean? I answer that question with a question. If I were to ask you, what is the American dream? You probably all kind of have like a picture in your heads of like what that is supposed to look like. And what that is supposed to look like, right? It's kind of like bucolic 1950s America, right? You have a wonderful human family with a husband and a wife and 2 kids, and they have a dog and a turkey in the oven and 2 cars in the garage and a nice green yard. And they live in a bucolic suburb with the happy neighbors where the husband comes out and he reads the paper every day in his robe and he goes to work to his 9-to-5 job where he makes $65,000 a year and can raise a family of 5 on that income. Put 2 kids through college. Like that's the, the American dream. So, well, anomie plays into that, right? It takes, because then you're supposed to achieve that. But then, how do you achieve that? Well, in America, right, you have to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Now, let's put aside to the fact that phrase makes no sense. That phrase is supposed to indicate something that is physically impossible. But anyways, it's taken to mean something else, and we're going to use the common parlance. So you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's hard work, and go to school and get an education and get a good job, and you'll be able to, support your family. The problem is that is not as easy for some people to do as others. And even if it is easy for you to do, I can tell you from experience that simply putting your nose to the grindstone, I have no idea where I'm going, putting your nose to the grindstone, working hard, getting good grades, going to school, getting the good job, does not immediately result in you achieving the American dream. Oh, I think this is where I'm supposed to go. My personal story, right? I went to college. I went to law school, 3 years of law school. I passed the bar. I got a job as an attorney, right? Started working. Didn't make more than $40,000 a year, which, is, don't get me wrong, is a good amount of money. It's above the median, but I went to law school, right? I'm supposed to be making lots of monies. Not how it works, right? And I'd worked for a couple years at a job that I slowly discovered that I did not enjoy. And even though I had a fiance, even though I had, a nice apartment, right? We struggled to make ends meet. Still struggle to make ends meet. And I'm a college professor, goddammit. So it's obviously the working hard and putting your nose to the grindstone thing isn't necessarily the way to the American dream. And so that frustration you feel that wait, I did everything I'm supposed to do, it's not working, is called anomie. And that anomie can result in a couple different things, and it depends upon the person, right? It depends upon again, other things. But we're gonna murder this guy.
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
He's a zombie. We're gonna murder a zombie. He's eating. We're gonna eat and do this, and then do this. Ah, he's dead. See, we had to kill the watery, sturdy, bloody sample. That's it sounds gross. What anime can result in is one of three things. You can either just kind of like accept your fate and you just keep pushing through. You either realize that like, okay, the game is rigged, so I'm gonna start playing the actual game. If you have the ability to do so, Yuri, which you bring up, who you know, whose back you scratch, right? Who's your father, how much money you have, or you give up, right? You just fine and you just live in squalor and become like a drug addict or something like that, right? Oh, he noticed me. All right, come at me, bro. Come at me, bro.
What's up, bro? What, bro? Sup, bro? Take a swing, bro. Right here, bro.
Up. Stab, eat, and then kill. So you either change your game, you give up, or you turn to crime and you adapt. And that adaptation that you take is to become a criminal. That's the third path, and that is anime, or the social strain theory, explains why some people turn to crime, especially the lower socioeconomic statuses, because they don't have, screw you guys, stabby, stun, eat, and kill. Ooh, a photograph of a smiling and lovely couple with a few words written on the back. Milton and Pippa forever. Milton and Pippa work at the hospital. That's anime, right? That's social strain theory. That's how it applies generally to criminality. How does it apply to serial killers specifically? Well, serial killers can experience anime as well and experience that social frustration. However, they end up taking a much darker path if they feel that sense of frustration. Well, hello, I've interrupted this video. If you like this content, please like, subscribe, follow over on twitch.tv/fbescra. It helps the channel out, helps me do more with these videos. And back to the video. Social class theory states that serial killers, well, first of all, we have to go statistically. Most serial killers tend to be in the middle to lower classes, right? And I realized I never actually went through these social classes. So when we were talking about these classes, right? The socioeconomic class, I'm going to stop right here so we can kind of like do it. And I'll do a thing where it all goes up on the stream, like right next to me right here. So you have, it's broken up into upper mid, average mid, working class, and lower class, right? The vast majority of Americans live somewhere in the average mid, working class to lower class, right? That's where the vast majority of Americans are. And so you are considered lower class if your household income is less than $25,000 a year. Not a lot of money, right? If you make between $50,000 and $25,000 a year, you are considered working class. Again, listen to my story from before. I was an attorney making $40,000 a year. I was a working class attorney, right? They exist. I'm currently a working class professor. If between 50,000 and 115,000, you're at average mid. Between 115 to 250,000, you're that upper mid, and anything above $250,000 a year is considered upper class, right? And then you have like that tiny fraction of a percent of people who are the ultra wealthy, the Jeff Bezos of the world and whatnot. They make up such a fraction of a percent of the population, but own like 95% of the monies. And the rest of us squabble over the scraps. Well, anywho, when it comes to the reason why the social class theory kind of like works so well to discuss why there is so much crime within those lower classes, if you consider that the average person only makes about $36,000 a year. I believe the average American income is $36,000. That is not a lot of money, especially considering what you're supposed to do with it, right? You're supposed to raise a family of 4. You're supposed to put your kids through school. You're supposed to do all of that, right? How are you supposed to support a family with such a little income? Ooh, by stealing shillings. Ooh, there's people in the morgue. I'm gonna murder this guy. We're just gonna run up on him. Ready? Ah! There we go. I'm like on the lookout for like zombies now. This is not fun. Ooh, kill this man. Ah. See, I knew there would be another one. All right, where was I? Anywho, I got distracted. Going downstairs. Ooh, creepy man. When we're talking about serial killers, they generally fall into that lower to working class to lower class territory. That's where the vast majority of them are anyways. Funny thing is that if there are two types of serial killers. Generally speaking, if you have a serial killer that does not prefer a particular gender, they kill at either their socioeconomic status or below. And if they prefer women, it doesn't matter. The status doesn't matter. It's just the fact that they're a woman is enough to kill them. Why? Because again, serial killers are, generally speaking, are about control. And who do you have control over? Those who are lesser than you. And the structure of society into these separate classes, they aim for the people that are below them. It's almost a source of frustration sort of thing, where because they are suffering from this enemy that they have, right? It's about this modicum of control over what they perceive to be their source of frustration. And the lower socioeconomic classes are symbolically what frustrate them because they don't want to be that, right? They see it as that's not the ideal. It's not what they're supposed to be, and they are a drain on society, and thus getting rid of them, sometimes helps. And there are a couple serial killers out there who that was there was one specifically, and I can't remember his name. He believed that he was doing society a favor by killing all prostitutes, right? Because they were, harlots and whores and a drain on society, and I did society a favor. That's social class theory. Now, we can move on to, though, right? Talking about the social structure, we can talk about the bonds of society, and starting with social process or social learning theory. These theories, generally speaking, are about learned behavior. Oh, Dr. Tippett killed this man and then tried to hide it. We have a murderer in our midst. Learned behavior, right? Social structure is about, well, you commit crime because you don't have a choice, because the way society is set up is that it puts you into that situation. Social process theory says that society teaches us to commit crime or to kill. And it does it in one of two ways. And I'll get into that in just 1 second. See, boss fight room. There he is. Oop, dodge. Stop it. Stop it. God damn it. Stop. Stop it. Oh, I'm just going to have to murder him. There we go. I bite him. And then... Get off the stairs. Oh. Do that again. Do that again. Oh. Hey, I got him. Yeah. All right, so now I can talk about the social process theories because the boss fight is over. Who do you learn from, right? Well, you learn from your peers. You learn from the people who raised you, your parents. You learn from your teachers, like this guy. You learn from a whole slew of, but you also learn, like, it takes a village. You learn from everything you experience. And really, when it comes down to this, it's about observation, essentially. And then I think I need to craft that. So now I bring this back up to the nurse because they were out of antiseptic, and now we have some because I have made some, because I am an amazing doctor after defeating a vampire lord in the basement of the morgue. Get me the fuck out of here. Albert Bandura did a lot of work when it came to social process theories and learned behavior specifically in children. And the Bobo doll experiment. I've talked about it before, actually, on stream in another class. But the Bobo doll experiment is really, really mad interesting because it basically shows if you were to show a child a certain behavior, whether it is kind or unkind, they repeat it. Now, here's the interesting bit about that. If it's a kind behavior, they repeat it 1-to-1. But if it's an unkind behavior, such as violent behavior, they take that and then they expand upon it, right? And so the Bobo doll experiment is really, really interesting. The Bobo doll experiment did a thing where they showed a video to some children, and they showed one of two videos, either a nurse playing with, or an aide playing with a Bobo doll, which was this inflatable Bobo, like, clown thing, and either, like, having tea with it and petting it and hugging it, or it was the video of the woman beating up the Bobo doll. When they showed the video of the aide beating up the Bobo doll to children, the kids followed that behavior, became violent with the Bobo doll, but then also started calling it bad words, right? There's like, oh, you little son of a bitch, I'm going to get you. They picked up little toy guns and pointed it at the Bobo doll when that behavior was never modeled. A whole bunch of slew of behaviors that the kids just took upon themselves after observing violent behavior. Social process theories state that, we just learn criminality. And we go back to when we talked about maybe 2 weeks ago, the cycle of violence. Serial killers come from abused homes, or at least that this is one explanation, is that they can come from the fact that maybe they were abused or they witnessed abuse as a child and basically just carried that over into their adulthood and can't control that behavior anymore. That's social process theory in a nutshell as it applies to serial killers. Moving on from that, though, one of my favorite process theories, social control theory. Right? Everything we've been talking about thus far asks, why do people commit crime? Social control theory is different in that the question it asks isn't why do people commit crime, it's why do people pay attention to the law in the first place? It answers that question by saying because we have certain attachments to society. And those attachments consist in 4 parts, 4 social bonds that apply to everyone. They are attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. Attachment to an institution, commitment to a person, place, or thing, involvement with that within the society, and then belief, some sort of belief system. Social control theory, or modern social control theory, says that those bonds keep us in line with the law. Keep us, obeying the law and adhering to the social contract because we want society to prosper. However, if at any point those bonds get cut, then we can lean into criminality. How does that apply to serial killers? Serial killers lose those bonds. Those bonds get cut. An example of this is I actually got into an argument with somebody on Reddit about this. Imagine a kid who hears his father say some racist shit. And so he comes into school and espouses that racist shit, but because he's a kid and he's observed bad behavior, he then takes it a step further and maybe makes a violent statement, right? Something to the effect of like going to get a gun or something like that. Now, whether the kid means it or not, that threat is serious and should be taken seriously. However, according to, current academic doctrine, 0 tolerance is the rule of the day, and that kid should just be expelled. Well, expelling that kid does nothing but sever the social bond of education, right? That attachment to a school, their friends, right? Their involvement in any extracurricular activities they had, their commitment to their grades, all of those bonds get severed. And all it does is simple expulsion does nothing but push them further away from society. And it's those methods that can push someone towards criminality. And, it's the serial killers who feel as if they are excluded from society. They're one of the stereotypes is that they're a loner, right? Well, it's not necessarily that they're a loner, but they could feel as if they've been abandoned. That is what social control theory says. There are some other theories that are at play. The labeling theory. There is the McDonald triad, which I can touch on briefly before moving into trauma control model. The McDonald triad is, so when it comes to trying to identify serial killers, right? I'm sure you've all heard it before, that if a kid lights fires, pees his bed, and tortures animals, they're going to be a serial killer. That's the McDonald triad. And the McDonald triad doesn't say that it is, guaranteed that if they do those three things, they're going to become a serial killer. No. What it says is that those three things should act as a red flag. That child or that adolescent is on the edge and can be taken back from the edge, but needs maybe a little bit of extra work. So the McDonald triad: fire setting, bedwetting, or enuresis is the clinical term for it, and torturing of animals. Now, of those three, enuresis is one that if, like, fire setting on itself, can be troublesome and should be watched. Torturing animals, really troublesome, should be watched. Enuresis by itself, however, is something that actually 80% of children or something like that suffer from. It's basically, enuresis is wetting the bed past the age of 8 or something like that. And 80% of them, it just clears up by the age of like 10. There's an adage in the psychological world that not all bedwetters have undergone trauma, but all of those children undergoing trauma wet the bed. And it's a really good sign that maybe something's going on, which handedly gets us into the last topic for tonight: trauma and the trauma control model. Now, the trauma control model, I'm not going to define this or sketch this out for you, and you're going to be able to completely understand how serial killers work. It is meant to kind of lay out a bit of a roadmap for how someone who suffers a trauma or a perceived trauma can end up becoming a violent offender. So the trauma control model basically says that the path that can be taken, a perceived trauma, that trauma results in low self-esteem fantasies. Those fantasies slowly become ever more violent, and then those violent fantasies eventually aren't enough and can lead to homicidal behavior. That's the basic path. However, the model, if you notice, has 3 paths to it. The first thing you have to look at is, are there any what they call predispositional factors? And what a predispositional factor is: genetic, it can be psychological, it can be sociological, right? Any of the things that we've talked about either today or last week. Are they in a working class family? Are they in a broken home? Do they have any mental illness? Do they have any biological disorders? Those can be predispositional factors. That factors into whether or not how severe the trauma needs to be to have a serious effect on the child. Then the trauma occurs. And again, it just needs to be a perceived trauma. And I say that because whereas you or I may deem trauma to be being physically assaulted or sexually assaulted, depending upon the predispositional factors present, it may just be a feeling of abandonment, maybe all that is needed, right? And depending upon, how securely attached the child is to their parent. If that parent basically kind of leaves them with their grandparents too long, that can be a perceived trauma. The trauma, whatever it may be, perceived trauma occurs. The child can either go straight into low self-esteem fantasies or can follow a path of dissociation. And dissociation, much like DID, is kind of like a psychological method of your brain protecting itself. And it can, ignore or repress, or, you start to suffer from PTSD. All of those issues factor into dissociation. If that's the path that's taken, what can occur are what are called, I'm a living paradox, what are called trauma reinforcements. And what a trauma reinforcement is, so imagine, a child that was beaten when they were very young. And then as they get older, right, they may have repressed those memories. But as they get older, they go see a movie that portrays that. And all of a sudden it brings everything back. That's a traumatic reinforcement. That can then key into those low self-esteem fantasies. Because what can happen is that, you start fantasizing about what you would have done in the situation, right? If you had control now, if you would experience it now, or if you could stop it now. What can happen from here is that the person may start using facilitators. Facilitators can be used by these people who are within the trauma control model to enhance those low self-esteem fantasies or help them deal with them, right? Maybe they get over it by watching violent movies or maybe pornography, right? But then that pornography starts turning violent, right? Where they have like those smut films, or they have the BDSM stuff, which then leads to those increasingly violent fantasies. What can happen is those violent fantasies no longer are enough to satisfy that person's psyche. And so they then need to act on those fantasies. And that's where homicidal behavior can happen. Basically, from beginning to end, trauma leads to feelings of low self-esteem and fantasies of how to deal with that low self-esteem. Those fantasies become violent, right? Like, so a kid is beaten up by school, right? Experiences nightmares at night about that bully. That's the low self-esteem fantasy. But while, daydreaming during the day, imagines murdering the bully, right? Those are the violent self-esteem fantasies. And then imaginings aren't enough. And so the child brings a gun to school and shoots their bully. That's the homicidal behavior. That's the extreme end, right? That is, the trauma control model is an explanation. It is not a means of prediction, but it is something that can be used to sort of be compared with serial killers in the past that we know about. Kind of the path that they followed. Specifically, if they've had trauma in their early ages. Really, what it comes down to is trauma at an early age has a really strong effect on a child. And they can, if not helped or provided with the necessary therapy or, environment, they can be led down that path that can end up in criminality, homicidal behavior, and the topic that we're talking about, serial killers. All of these things that we've talked about are kind of explanations of behavior. Not every serial killer is going to fit exactly into each one of these theories, but they are, we will talk about profiling in a bit. This is what you use for profiling. You use these theories. Look at the background of the offender. What can you determine about them, and what theory fits them, right? Or you work it backwards. Start with a theory and say, okay, well, these are the backgrounds that we need to look for, and that's how you identify the person. That's how profiling works, essentially. And that's, I believe, it for today's Big Brain. Now, this chapter is dense. I could have spent another hour going into everything in this chapter. I skipped a couple things that it's not that they're not relevant, but like to kind of keep things concise, and it still took me an hour to get through. And that is going to do it for us this week with the Big Brain. Relax and learn. Thank you so much for watching. Next week, we will be talking about the difference between male and female serial killers. So if you'd like to catch that stream Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over at twitch.tv/FPSgra. If you like this content, please like, subscribe, follow over on Twitch, and I will see you next time.